Hello, and thanks for joining us for another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America. Each episode, we bring you a fresh and insightful interview featuring one of the film industry's top directors, conducted by one of their peers. You can subscribe to our podcast on Google Play Music, iTunes, Stitcher, or on our SoundCloud page at soundcloud.com/thedirectorscut. And if you're enjoying The Director's Cut, please take a moment to like, share, or comment. We love hearing your feedback. This episode takes us behind the scenes of Norwegian director Erik Poppe's new film, The King's Choice. The film follows Norway's King Haakon VII during 3 days in 1940, when he faced a moral decision about whether or not to cooperate with the invading German army. Greatly outnumbered and facing almost certain defeat, Norwegians, following their king's choice, broke all rules of international diplomacy and warfare. The film was screened as part of the DGA's Global Cinema Series, which aims to spotlight landmark foreign films for DGA members and guests by presenting screenings of contemporary, classic, and independent films, as well as conversations with their directors. Mr. Poppe's previous film, Hawaii, Oslo, was the inaugural film of the Global Cinema Series. Since 2004, the program has screened 97 films from 46 countries around the world. The King's Choice was the Norwegian submission for Best Foreign Language Film at the 2017 Academy Awards. In addition to The King's Choice and Hawaii, Oslo, Mr. Poppe's credits include the award-winning feature films 1000 Times Good Night and Troubled Water. Following the Global Cinema Series screening of the film at the DGA Theater in Los Angeles, Mr. Poppe spoke with fellow director Victoria Hochberg about filming The King's Choice. During their conversation, Mr. Poppe touches on the value of having 12 weeks of rehearsal time with his actors, the extensive research process for the film, which involved poring over 17,000 pages worth of books and interviews, and the visual strategy of the film, which utilized a handheld camera technique rather than Steadicam.
Okay, please welcome the director of this amazing piece of work, Erik Poppe. We had dinner, and one thing that came up was the kind of history of how did Norway accept a guy who wasn't Norwegian as king. So Erik said he would give a very brief explanation of how that happened. Do you not want to do it? Or?
Yeah, well, I can.
Okay.
I can try to do it shortly. In 1905, Norway experienced for the first time since the 15th century to once again be a free country. Norway was actually sort of the place where kings were invented. It was the first kings who appeared, they were the Viking kings, and Norway was a proud sort of monarchy, or they had different kings. But then they disappeared in the 15th century, and Norway was a part of Denmark. And later, while Denmark was losing in the Napoleon Wars, they had to hand over Norway to Sweden. So Sweden took over Norway in the 1814. And finally, in 1905, people resisted and sort of said, enough is enough, we want to be our own country. And they almost declared war to Sweden. And just some hours before it all broke out, the Swedish king said, okay, you can take your country back. And Norway became a sovereign nation. But then people got almost like panic. We need to do something so the Swedes don't regret and come back and take us, or the Danes decide they want to take the country. So some of the most prominent people in Norway at that time said, we need a king. Where can we find a king? And they looked all over and then decided in Denmark. The Danish king, he had 2 sons. The oldest son was, of course, to be the next Danish king. Why don't we ask the youngest son if we want to be our king? This Danish guy. So they went to Copenhagen and they asked him. And and he was sort of the smart guy, because his older brother, he was a lazy guy. He knew he was going to be a king in Denmark, so he did. But this younger guy, he was well educated. He was interested in the world. He was quite sort of he was a smart guy. But what he said is that, well, I'll accept to be your king if your people want me, if that's your people's wish. And those, the politicians, and they said, well, of course they want you. We ask you, can you just accept? And he said, I will accept under one condition, that you go back to Norway and you have an election. Because if I will be your king, I will serve you, and I will serve your people. Because to be a king here in a country like Norway, I want to define that part of that role differently. I want to be watching it, seeing it as on top of the society are the people. The people are the one deciding how we're going to rule this country. And under the people, you guys are, in the parliament. Don't forget that you are serving the people. It's not the opposite. And on the bottom, am I? I'm your king, so I'll do whatever I can do for Norway. What's best for Norway is what I will do, whether it serves me or not, whether, my family will be threatened or we can be killed, but I will use my life to serve the people. So he sort of was the first king and the only king ever who have sort of put the model upside down. Because all the kings, they are sort of, like the French king in before the revolution, like the British king today, the Queen, all over, they are sort of like have like, with God, I'm ruling this country, and those stupid things. But he made that one single sentence, I'll give my all for Norway, and put everything upside down. So he was just like he was strange enough like a Democrat. And that the world has never seen anything like that. And so in a way he created the most modern monarchy in the world today. And that also leads us into this story and why he actually felt that he had to sacrifice his family and everything to do what he had to do. He even had to sacrifice part of the people's safety by putting it into the war. So he was this really rare figure and someone which, when I've been going into this subject, I've got so much respect for that man. So that was my short answer on your long question. Yeah,
that's a good segue, because I did want to talk about the beginning of this project. So it was a book, and then it became a screenplay. And so what was your participation in the development of the story, aside from the passion that you have to talk about this situation and this wonderful king? What, just in terms of directing, what was your participation in that regard in terms of developing the script?
Well, I was presented for the script. The book wasn't released yet, but I was presented for the script. And I've read it and felt that the book was sort of emphasizing the whole attack on Norway, which lasted for several months, really. But the fact that I didn't want to make a war movie. I felt that it needed to be and sort of a close, tight perspective on the story, and I wanted to see how I could challenge the sort of historical, epical drama by seeing what can we do now to get closer, bring the audience into the feeling of almost being there. Because I feel most of the movies we do, historical movies, they are a bit, staged, set up. And in a way, I felt that I needed to make some decisions, that this story is about those 3 days, the 3 most dramatic days, because during those 3 days, we really didn't know what was going to happen. anyway, by the end of these 3 days, we declare war towards Germany. And we were at that time the first country to actually declare war to Germany. The Poland, they were just attacked and taken. And Denmark were just, they just had to hand over the country after 45 minutes.
His brother.
And his brother,
right?
yeah.
His big brother.
His big brother. So, but they actually declared war. And that was extraordinary in a way. So I felt that I needed to find out where to tell this story and what to take out of the story, how to limit it. And for every story I do, I always set up really strong rules, for what this film is not about. And that's an interesting exercise. But it helps everyone to say that, okay, this is a story about the king. And how could I relate to that story? As, of course, it's a story about how Norway was taken over by the Germans. But for me, it was much more a story about relationships between a father and a son, and about a family. And it's a relationship about a German ambassador and his wife and his little kid. And everything is taken from what we know. Too good to be true to put in a film, but that was actually what happened.
Well, you've asked my second question, which is that this, of all the films of World War II, the one that seems closest when I was looking at it was Casablanca, which is not about the battles, but at the center is a love story. So you have a love story between father and son, in essence, and between the king and his people, and between the German ambassador, who of course is one of the more phenomenal characters, and his being torn between his duty and his passion to make peace, to do his job right. So it is all about the relationships. Of course, you did the battles, which were wonderful, but that was my main interest in how did you decide to sculpt that? What were the rules that you said this isn't about? What was it not going to be about then?
Well, I wanted. I've done a PhD where I've studied how we are setting up our stories in movies compared to literature, and how far they come in literature, and how free they are to limitate and just sort of choose really, really close perspectives. Avoid everything around. I mean, you just go in and start following a character without knowing too much, and by the time you learn to know more about that character. And by looking at what can I take out, I started two movies back to look into see what I could remove, take out of the movies, and sort of strip them more naked and down to the bone, and even avoid like establishing shots. Now this film started by me just going for the king. Then I felt that, okay, I needed to see the story from the other perspective, from the German side. And then I felt that the German ambassador was the most interesting figure, because he was like a good German. And remember that there were a lot of them who really were fighting to avoid war, conflict. I mean, he was not like a Nazi. The interesting thing that he was part of the foreign department, and they were all kicked out after the first weeks, because Hitler didn't need them. He just put in his military people instead. But then I wanted to say, okay, so that's the other perspective. By being with the king and them, I couldn't cut to, for instance, being with the young crown prince by himself. I couldn't cut to the politicians being by themselves if it wasn't for that the king or the ambassador was in the room. I just was with them all the time. Now, finally, I needed to show some sequence of war to remind us and to show those two most important battles, which actually made the king escape and come out of this alive. And that was, of course, in the beginning when they stopped the ship coming into the Oslo and captured the king and the parliament, the government. And then once again, when these young soldiers stopped the Germans from taking the king. They were really close. So even in those stories, I wanted to see the whole thing from that person's perspective.
You focus very closely on
Yeah.
the commander at the beginning and on that one beautiful seabird.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm always with Seaberg. So I don't cut to other places, even physically around. When I capture the battle scene, it's always seen from Seaberg's point of view.
Right.
And that's sort of, by doing that, I believe that I'm bringing the audience closer into being there. Not reminding them as much as about that this is a movie, but just see what can we do to, get a closer intimacy between you and the audience and what's going on the screen.
Well, one thing we did talk about before was that the king seemed not to be a king in the way that we're used to, which is there was almost no separation between him and the people on the train. There wasn't that sense of he is a special being. He was, and so when anything is happening to him, he feels very human. All of them. That was one of the great things about this film. A German who we've seen, this is a phenomenal actor. You really do feel that he's in a vise, and he's so good. So the humanity of all the characters, even the son, who, most of the sons all want to be king, and he even says, I don't want to be a king like you, but yet he's tremendously compassionate towards his father. But when you focus on the relationships, then you really are talking about working with actors, which is, of course, what we all do. And so what was your approach with them? Each of these actors obviously is different. Your king is a very well-known actor, isn't he? A Danish actor. And Kurt, what's his last name?
Karl Markovich.
Karl Markovich is a brilliant actor. Did any of you see? We showed when the money's not the real money, it's
the counterfeiter. Counterfeiter.
Yeah. We showed that film here. I don't know if any of you were here when we did it, but he's incredible in that. And so clearly he's not going to have the same training as the young son. So how did you work with each of them? Did you rehearse? Did one guy say, I don't like to rehearse? And what were some of the things that you did in those struggles with them?
Well, I prefer to go into the production and see how can I set up and finance a lot, sort of a bigger period of time of going in the rehearsals. And for almost all my movies, I've been working a lot in theater as well. And in the theater, I always get 8 weeks of rehearsal. And for me, it's strange that when doing a film, I'm not allowed to use more than 2 or 3 weeks of rehearsals. I think that's strange. It should be the opposite.
2 or 3 weeks more than you get in television.
So, yeah, I know. So I've introduced the idea of working 12 weeks with actors. That doesn't mean that we're sitting there every day working with a text. But how do we get into the subject, into the characters? How do I bring them into my research? How do we meet people? How do we go around, travel, preparing? So for my other movie before, I got Juliette Binoche and in for 12 weeks. She had never had anything more like 2 or 3 weeks. And we went to Syria. Then she was doing a war photographer. And we went all over. Of course, she needed to learn. And it takes time. And by the time we're traveling around, living together close for 12 weeks, I can allow myself to remove 2, 3, up to 4 days of shooting, maybe a week of shooting, because then we are so prepared. And that allows me to introduce my actors for another way of setting up the stories by shooting scenes all through, as you see here as well. So like here, there are scenes, for instance, when you see the scene where the king and the ambassador finally meet and they have their really historical meeting. That's a meeting which took place, lasted for 10 minutes. And that is actually shot in one shot, as you probably will see. The camera is moving around for those 10 minutes.
I certainly did notice that. Actually, that was going to be my next question. Maybe I'll give you this paper and I'll answer. No, I of course that was astonishing, but I did notice though that you must have had another camera in there maybe for an earlier take when the other gentleman, you had like 4 or 5 people in that room, and you did have cuts in there. But once Herr, whatever his name is, walked in, that was, I said, I kept saying to myself, I don't believe he's doing this. It was so my question is, did you block it for them? Did you rehearse, and did they know where they were going? Because at a certain point, the king seemed to be trying to get away, and the ambassador was like stalking him.
Yeah.
And there was a little bit of, he covered him a little bit. So I just did, how did you have marks, or did you say, look, you have to do this, you have to do this, just go and we'll follow you like a documentary crew?
Well, I felt that going in, working with the rehearsals is about starting looking at the characters, look at the scenes. And most of all, I don't start changing the scenes, the dialogue. I want us to keep on looking and searching for why they're doing what they are. And then start doing the physics by bringing them into a room and going through the scenes and prolonging them, what happens before, afterwards. And then just in an empty room, do that several weeks before we shoot it, and feel for the physics and see how they relate. And by that time, we sort of figure out how he's trying to sort of capture following him. So right. I would say that's done. That comes from out of the actors. I need to be open, allowing them to see what happens, and we are playing with the scenes, and then I'm bringing them really into a higher tension, and we do the scenes, and I'm lifting it up, and sort of twisting it in and see how much of the emotions can we get out of it. Right. And I'm never afraid for that they're not able to do it again, because it's actually the opposite. If an actor knows that he's done it once, he knows he can do it again. And then I'm leaving the scene. So for the last couple of weeks, we're working with other stuff like small physics things and what they need to learn and whatever. So then I left the rehearsals for the actual scenes. We're just doing other stuff, and then in the morning we for the first time again discussed the scenes and read through, feel a bit for how they could work, and then we go into the room and I allow them to just be there, feel the sense of room, and then I'm bringing the camera and we shoot. And
so you don't have marks?
No, so I don't have marks. But then I know what's going to happen around, right. And I can tell the DOP or the operator what I believe will happen. And once again, as in this film, I told that you are the only one here. You need to capture this like a documentary. And this is an important moment, So please, follow your instinct and see how that works.
It was really spectacular. It was just, and you feel I can't believe that none of the actors said, "Hey, I'm dry. I've been doing, this is like take, or we've rehearsed this 18 times. I don't have anything left." That's unusual because most actors. But
I would say it's I have everything to thank my actors for, because they are the ones really doing it. And of course, we all know that different actors have different techniques. Mm-hmm. So once again, working with the kids is another issue. Right. Well, but it's sort of like how do you...
The little piggy scene.
Yeah, the little piggy scene.
I mean, that was clearly... How did you get that kid to... Did you improvise? Did you have the granddad, the grandfather, the king?
I did make some sort of practical things for the kid to work with. So we practiced sort of the scene, but I did write a scene a bit different from this one, and we practiced that for a while, also some weeks before. So when we came to the actual shooting day, that boy knew what was going on, and then he got new lines, and he was just reading the lines, and we just did it.
How he was what, 4 years old, 5 years old?
Yeah, 4 years old. Yeah.
And what about the girls? I thought, what did he tell those girls? Because they were really upset, the little daughters. How did, just, I've worked with some child actors, and they're not easy. So what was the secret there? What did you do to elicit that?
Well, first of all, it was just a matter of establishing a natural relationship to the ones who's supposed to be their mother and father and grandfather. And so during the whole shooting, they were, as we were traveling around, they were with us all the time. So they had 2-3 days off, but they were still there. And they were using the character names. So Jesper wasn't Jesper, but he was king, also he was Haakon, or what they were allowed to call him, granddad.
Right.
And both for Jesper and for the guy playing also Olav, the father and mother, they were in a way in character. They went out of their character, and they were, for the afternoon, but still they were using those names on the kids, and they established a relationship. So when we did the scene, the farewell scene, where they all know that I will never ever see them again, and that was actually what went on. Those kids, and we were, of course, I was preparing them for a farewell scene. And I also did that. That was the last scene we did with them. So they were also upset because we were done with the movie, the film.
So it was true they weren't going to see him again.
No, they weren't, and they were upset because now it was all over. They were looking forward to this shoot for months, and then we did it, and they were having fun, and this was it. So the tears came by natural reasons.
The father-son relationship. There's an amazing moment when he's reading his speech, and he kind of stumbles a little bit, and he puts his hand out, and the son puts his hand on his father's hand. Was that something that you had rehearsed, or did that just happen? That was quite beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I would say that we found that by the way people had described that meeting, because in that there were several people there, and they had written books, and they were written in the diaries that most of all what went on. And the moment in the speech were right, and they were describing that the young crown prince were suddenly helping his father because his father got problems in his speech. So we knew that, but exactly how it was supposed to be was once again how we figured it out by the rehearsals. Yeah. And I would once again emphasize that: make a plan, do rehearsals. The actors love it if you got a plan and an idea about what we're looking for, because that's what you get in those rehearsals.
Oh, it was spectacular. One other directorial thing. I can understand how you can do it with excuse me. I just want to know, in terms of blocking the more complicated scenes, like when the young boy soldiers, they're being spoken to by their sergeant or whatever you call him in Norway. Again, did you block that carefully where the cameras would go, or because you had a lot of background action also? So how much leeway did you give? You
mean during the battle scene?
No, not during the battle scene. When
the barn, when they're waiting, or? Well,
that was also, when he first gets the troops together in the snow outside, the exterior day scene.
Yeah, right.
It felt I was watching a news coverage, and of course that's what makes it so real and so terrific. But how much of that, these are real lines that of course they had to say, but how much of that did your cameraman have leeway? Also, when at one point the young crown prince gets out of the car and he follows him. But that kind of thing, how much leeway did you give your cinematographer when you... I'm sorry, go on.
Well, that scene is a 360, as you see. So of course it's blocked because people need to know what's going on, and the cameraman is that's one take, as you see. There are no cut in it, so that actually probably creates a sense of being there as well. That is, everything is going on around. So it is blocked, but I made a rule, and I said that I want to shoot this film as we are a documentary team. So I didn't allow any cranes or dollies or even put the camera on a tripod. It was always handheld.
Handheld, right.
But I wanted it to look like, so I made a rule that we are a documentary team who wants to make the film look like we are a feature team. So you're allowed to have a track in, but you have to hold it on your shoulder and keep your breath and just track it in there and avoid every sort of movement in the camera if you don't have to do that. Because the only thing is that those small, tiny movements, organic movements, I believe create something in our perception. So that was a rule.
No Steadicam. This was handheld.
Yeah.
Film? Digital? What did you use?
No, it was done on RAW, on digital. So, but yeah, and I was surprised that it worked so well in the night scenes. And then if you look at the battle scene, that's actually one single shot. I've made like 5-6 cuts in it, but that whole scene, whatever happens in all the area around, is shot all together. So the whole battle scene included him falling in the snow and me cutting back and the whole escape there. We practiced for 2 days. Then came the evening and we prepared for shooting the whole scene. And we shot that whole scene, or those 2 scenes, in one. So by starting filming it around when the sun was down, about 6-7 o'clock, by 9 o'clock we were done.
Wow.
So
one camera, not 2 cameras.
One camera.
Never 2 cameras.
And I would like to share a moment there because I had like about 500 to 600 extras in those scenes, and we were practicing. And then we were all preparing to shoot the scene, just waiting for the light. People had got their dinner and everyone was ready, and we had mobilized. So there was tons of groups out there with people on the walkie-talkies, and we had all the communications set up, just waiting, preparing, and suddenly the light was disappearing. I was supposed to start shooting. Then suddenly I got a message that there is someone visiting the set. And I said, who? Well, forget about that. We have to shoot. And they said, but Erik, it's Seberg, Fredrik Seberg, the young boy, but the old man today. Are we allowed to bring him into the set for him to watch the scene? I said, of course, bring him in. And then I just felt that, well, just hold it. Get everyone in. Fast. Let's get, like an urgent. Bring everyone up here. And the whole set of people, everyone came up to the camera. And in came Seberg. And there was all these young men. And then we all realized he came in. He walked there. He was an old man watching them. And by that time, it was just like, remember, you're all doing a character which really was, alive, doing what he did. So what we're going to do is so real. It's so important for this generation. So please do it honestly, real. And then Fredrik Seberg, he just went over and watched all these young kids, and he went through them and he was handshaking people. And those young men, the tears were just running. They were just totally upset, crying for that man. And then we said, okay, are we ready? Good. And they all went out, and we prepared for this whole thing. And by doing it 2 or 3 times, which took like 2 hours, or I had 3 takes, and we were all happy. That was it.
Well, I'm getting get the hook here from Matt. We only have a few minutes left, so I have a few more questions, but does anybody have a question that they would like to ask? Yes, the lady there with, I can't see because there's a light, but I know you have a lot of dark hair.
Well, to be honest, take the last thing, there's not much left from the book. I needed to go in and really do the research, as I told you in front. We read more than 17,000 pages of whatever was in different books and whatever, and interviewed all these people to figure out what happened and how were people related to each other, how were they talking to each other and whatever. And then again, putting and looking for the details as much as the overall story, because this shouldn't be a story about a king. It should be a story about a man, actually named Karl. Now he's gotten the new name Haakon. He had to take a Norwegian name when he then became the king. But it's a story about him. I'm basically, it's in the script. That thing. He did the hide and seek. So I've removed part of the scene when he's looking for the kids, just to, of course, make it as it is. But I felt that was a quite strong allegory for what a lot of people in Norway, they were at that stage, because the war hadn't started yet, but whole Europe was shaking. And by what we know today, they should have realized that soon there were going to be an attack. But Norway was at that a neutral country. They were dependent on that the Germans would respect that, but of course they didn't. But I felt that was sort of, it was like an allegory and a start for the story who ends up by have to see, have to learn, have to know, and have to act. So he starts as a lot of the leaders do today. Most of them, they do like that. Or they have a mirror, they just watch themselves and what they feel. That was it. So it was in the script.
Beautiful. Yes, in the back, gentleman with the hat, I think, or is that your hair too? Oh, sorry.
To tell that, I'd just like to share. I'll just stand by the end here. I'd just like to share that the way we put the story together, I got a relationship also to the royal family in a way that I needed to talk to, because also the king today, which is the young boy in the film, his 2 sisters, the oldest one is dead, but the one in the middle, she is alive, and she remembered everything down to detail of this, the fleeing from the Germans here. So it was so important for me to try to figure out as much as I could of who the king was and how they were, discussing and talking to each other. You have to remind me about your questions, but I need to tell this because I think it's important to see that. What we were looking for was who that man was. And what's interesting is that he came to Norway, to the castle. He was married to a woman, the Queen Maud. Queen Maud, his wife, she was actually the daughter to the British king. So, the king's speech. They went up to Norway to try to be Norwegian royals. She was longing to get back to Britain. So in the scene where they're discussing her part and that she was actually a lousy mother, and the son also accused her for not being, supporting on her husband or his father, the king. it's sort of something I haven't created. It actually took place. And he was living on this castle alone. Officially, we are all told that she went to Britain quite often to train her horses and whatever. But actually, in fact, she was there all time. Came sometimes to Norway. So that was the situation. So that man, I found out that he was a man living in this castle almost alone. He didn't have anyone close. He didn't have any friends. And when he were traveling around in Norway, he was speaking Danish, and the Norwegians didn't understand Danish. It was so strange. So he tried to speak Norwegian, but he couldn't. So he knew that people didn't understand him. He was alone, and he then developed something which I know because I'm quite tall, and he was a tall man. You do whatever to try to communicate. So if we are, I've been done it for my whole life because I want to communicate with you, and I sink a bit down. I do whatever I can do to, get in contact. So he's been desperate, living his life, not as someone ruling, but he wants to make contact with people. So his body became like that. So one day he got this really, really bad back. Thank you. And that's what we then figured out was that when Astrid, the Princess Astrid, told me that I came in and Granddad was lying on the floor often, like that. I didn't know why. And then I were tracking the doctor's records, and we figured out that he had a serious pain in his back, and that was the reason, because I know that happened to me, and the best thing is to stretch out your back like that. So whatever I saw, that was an image I could use, but that man was alone, and the only one he really related to, the only one who understood his language, strange language, that was of course his son and the grandkids. So the kids, that they were so important for him that for whatever reason he was not like the king with all the nannies, but he was so close related to them. And Astrid told that when there were royal visits coming to Norway, and they were coming into the castle, there was 1,000 people there, and it was just like the British king or whoever, and then the king came in, King Haakon, and every time he was starting looking for the kids first. That's strange. And then the kid came, and then he went down to the floor and he gave them a hug, and then he took them, and then he raised up, and then he went over to handshake the king or the official person. So he was quite extraordinary in that way. And now you have to remind me about your question. Yeah, that was it. Because then, by the end of the day, we sort of put this film together, and it was public that we have both made the film, and the royal family allowed us to film in the castle. So the scenes inside the castle is actually shot inside the castle. And that scene when you see that King Haakon comes up and have to say farewell to the bust of of his wife, that's actually shot inside the castle with a small team while the king and everyone was there. And this room, famous room, which I was filming, I was holding the camera myself. And it was just me, the actors, and one boom operator. And we did the scene. And I was leaning into a thick door, standing there. And I saw him come in, walked over to me, watched that figure. And then comes the crown prince in and say, we have to leave. I'm leaning there. And then suddenly I hear a voice just behind me, whispering in the phone, saying, I have to be quiet because they're filming here. And that was the king. Harald, because that was his office. And here were his grandfather and his father. It was just totally nonsense. And then, of course, they knew about the film, but they didn't knew about my approach and how I want to set it up. And what brings me to the answer is that when the film was done, it was prepared and it was supposed to open up in September, 33rd of September. And I was in my car, I think in one day in May or June, by afternoon, and suddenly I got a phone. And I answered, and it was the head of the whole castle, which is sort of the king's right hand. And he was calling, and the king was on his side. And they called me, and they said, "Excuse me, we just have a question." Because that was now last year. Of course, as you know, this is a celebration because the king and queen has been ruling in Norway for 25 years. And we are celebrating. So we want to open our park for the public, and we want to have an open air screening of film. And we wonder if you would allow us to screen your movie. The thing is that the occasion is 4 days prior to your opening of the film in Norway. But, you know, we just would like to consider if you would like to do that. And then the king were standing there, and then there was sort of, you know, wondering on my reactions and our reactions, which of course was an obviously great sort of way of opening the film. So we accepted. And by the day in September, when they had the screening, they were preparing for between 1,000 and 1,500 people to show up, and we had a huge screen. It was just in the middle of downtown Oslo. And they had doing rehearsals with sound to set up the sound system in the park. And you know the scenes here with the planes and bombs. And they were doing rehearsal during the daytime. And people were complaining all over Oslo to the police because they think it was something going on. Is it a war going on or whatever? So, you know, several kilometers or miles away, people were calling in because it was shaking in the whole downtown Oslo. It was beautiful sound. But then suddenly the evening came and 12,000 people showed up. The park was full of people, and they all had to sit down on the grass, sit there, waiting. And people start showing up several hours before. And the TV stations and news, everyone what's going on. So it was live on all the TV stations all the time during the whole evening. And then, as we were preparing, starting the film, suddenly among those thousands of people came the king, the queen, the whole family. And they came walking just in between everyone, without any security or guard or anything at all. Came down into the middle here where I was sitting. They sat down, and the crown prince today went up and introduced the film, said something about his grandfather and his father and his grandfather, what he learned about the story, and that he was, of course, curious about what this film was about. But then again, they sat down, and we screened the film for 2 hours. And I was almost sitting there all the time, holding my breath. Not, you know, I didn't want to... I was curious on the reactions so far, but I didn't dare to watch over to see. But then by the end of the film, there was a massive applause. And the applause was, of course, for the film, but most of all, actually for the king sitting there. And for the last words there, you know, he gave his all for Norway. So it was so beautiful. But then I was taken over and I was introduced for them. And he shared, and he has officially allowed me to share that with you, that he had been crying for the last hour. And while watching the film, he felt that he had watched his father which is the crown prince in the film, for the last 30 minutes. It was just like it was my dad. So they were just so relieved and so happy for the film, even if they're not allowed to express what they feel about movies and films like that. It's strange, but they don't. But they did, and so of course they were. So, and the popularity for the monarchy has raised in Norway.
Well, I hope we don't have to wait another 12 years to see you again. Please come back, make another movie, and we'll show it. Thank you so much. Thank you all for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. You can check out past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts, or on our website at dga.org/podcast. Also, if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe so you won't miss an episode. If you're enjoying the podcast, please like, share, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your feedback. Thanks again for listening, and have a great week. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.